The rain fell like a silent warning, each drop hitting the streets with a sound that echoed in the dark corners of the city. Shadows stretched long under flickering streetlights, and in the distance, a siren wailed, cutting through the night like a sharp blade. Nothing was still here, nothing was safe. Every alley whispered secrets no one dared to uncover, and every shadow hid someone watching. Beauty and danger danced together, intertwined, untouchable, yet unavoidable. This season, the darkness isn't just outside, it's inside. Waiting, moving, ready to reveal what has been hidden. The city was alive, but not with life, it pulsed with tension, like the heartbeat of something that refused to sleep. Rain-slick streets reflected neon lights in fractured colors, turning the familiar into something strange and dangerous. The sound of water dripping from gutters echoed off the walls, each drop like a ticking clock counting down to something inevitable. Figures moved through the night, not fully seen, always in shadows, always watching. The people on the streets went about their lives, unaware of the currents beneath their feet, unaware that the beauty of the city was only skin deep. Beneath it lay stories of betrayal, secrets whispered in quiet rooms, and choices made in darkness that could never be undone. The city held its breath as if it knew that what was coming could not be stopped. From the rooftops, silhouettes observed silently, their eyes glinting in the faint neon glow. A hand reached out from a darkened window, fingers brushing against a letter that had arrived without warning, a message carrying both threat and promise. In another part of the city, shadows merged and separated, moving like smoke. Hints of figures who had been lost before now returned. Every movement seemed purposeful, measured, calculated. Something old had awakened, something that had waited patiently through seasons past, and now the time had come to step back into the world. The tension was almost visible, hanging in the air like fog, curling around lampposts and street signs, wrapping the city in a sense of anticipation no one could escape. Inside the walls of a grand but empty building, the echoes of footsteps told stories. Each step was deliberate, echoing in hollow corridors where memories lingered. Dust stirred as if it remembered the presence of those who had walked here before. The shadows in this place were not simple absence of light, they were alive, twisting with a will of their own. Windows rattled with the force of the storm outside, and lightning briefly illuminated the outlines of faces, or was it only illusions created by the flash? The building seemed to breathe, almost sentient, ready to reveal the stories of the past and the secrets that had been carefully kept hidden. Outside, the wind carried whispers, faint voices calling out names long forgotten, pulling attention to corners of the city where danger waited quietly. Patiently, the people who knew something was wrong moved cautiously, never showing their full intentions. Their faces were hidden in shadows, their steps quiet but intentional. Messages left in hidden places, keys dropped into mailboxes, small signs that only those who knew the truth could understand. Trust was a currency more valuable than gold, but even that could not protect against what was coming. The city itself seemed to recognize the change, a chill that wasn't entirely weather, a silence that spoke louder than words. A sense of inevitability that wrapped around everyone and everything. Every neon reflection on wet pavement, every distant horn, every flickering light added to the tension. The darkness was returning, and it carried with it promises and threats alike. Even in the smallest details, signs of change were visible. A discarded glove on a street corner, a shadow that lingered too long. A door left slightly open in a house that had been empty for years, small things that hinted at the presence of something bigger, something unseen but undeniable. The city's heartbeat quickened, almost in anticipation, almost in fear. Every movement, every shadow, every flicker of light told the story of what had been lost and what was about to be found. The night seemed to stretch endlessly, each moment heavy with expectation. And somewhere in that darkness, the beauty that had been hiding in plain sight was preparing to return, ready to face the shadows once again. The city's pulse changed as the night deepened. Streets that once felt familiar now seemed foreign, warped under the weight of hidden intentions. Every corner held a secret, every doorway a silent witness to acts no one would speak of. Fog rolled in low, curling around lampposts, hiding the faces of those who moved with purpose. There was no sound except the occasional scuff of shoes against wet pavement and the distant hum of neon. But even that hum seemed to carry meaning and unspoken warning that eyes were everywhere. The walls of the city seemed to close in, pressing the air heavy with anticipation. In this darkness, nothing was ordinary. Even the rain carried weight, falling not just to wet the streets, but to mark the presence of something unseen. Something patient, something waiting inside a narrow alley. A figure paused under the dim glow of a flickering light. The outline of a coat moved like liquid, blending seamlessly with the shadows. Fingers brushed against a small envelope pinned to a wall, its edges wet from the rain. The contents were unknown, yet the weight of its message pressed down, unseen but undeniable. Around the corner, another shadow watched silently, unmoving, the faintest glint of metal catching a distant light. A single step forward would set a chain in motion, though neither figure knew how far it might reach. Trust had no place here. Loyalty was a fragile, fleeting notion that could shatter with a whisper or a glance. Every action, even the smallest, rippled outward, and consequences were already quietly forming, invisible but inevitable. High above, on a rooftop slick with rain, another presence lingered. The wind whipped at the edges of a coat, revealing just enough movement to suggest life, but not identity. I scanned the streets below, searching for signs, tracing the patterns of movement that only someone who had survived before could see. There were footprints in the mud, fleeting and almost erased by the rain, hints of those who had passed through moments ago. A bag left unattended on a bench held more than mere belongings. It held intention, a secret waiting for the right moment to be unveiled. And yet, no one dared rush forward. The night demanded patience, demanded observation, demanded caution. Here, every shadow was a story, every flicker of light a question, and every sound an answer someone was too afraid to hear. Inside a dimly lit building, the air was thick with the remnants of conversations never spoken aloud. Furniture lay scattered as if abandoned in haste, and the smell of damp would mingle with something else, smoke, perhaps, or the faint trace of a perfume that lingered too long. A hand reached out, fingers tracing the edge of a photograph pinned to a wall. Faces in the photograph were obscured, blurred by time and circumstance, yet the emotions captured their fear, desire, longing felt real. The photograph was more than a memory. It was a warning, a clue, a piece of a puzzle no one fully understood. Somewhere deeper in the building, footsteps echoed, soft and deliberate, blending with the low hum of the city outside. The silence between them carried as much weight as the sound itself, each pause pregnant with meaning, each step a choice that could not be undone. Even the streets themselves seemed to conspire with the darkness. Neon lights reflected in puddles like fractured mirrors, casting distorted images of the city that made reality feel uncertain. A cat darted across an empty intersection, its eyes glowing unnaturally bright, momentarily catching the attention of a hidden observer. Cars passed in slow, careful lines, their headlights slicing through the mist and illuminating fragments of a story that only the night could tell. Somewhere, a door creaked, a lock clicked, a curtain twitched. These small, almost imperceptible movements were the threads of a larger tapestry threads that, when pulled, would unravel truths long buried. And yet, amidst all the tension, the city moved with a strange, silent rhythm, as if it knew that everything was about to change. As if it had been waiting for this very night to reveal what had been hidden in the shadows for far too long. The night thickened as if the air itself had grown heavier, pressing down on the streets and buildings like a living weight. Fog crawled along the alleyways, twisting and curling around corners, hiding secrets from those who weren't looking carefully. Every sound carried far in this stillness, the soft scuff of shoes on wet pavement, the distant hum of a neon sign, the faint murmur of voices that seemed to come from nowhere. The city felt alive, but it wasn't alive in the way most people imagined. It pulsed with something darker, something patient, waiting for the right moment to strike. Shadows moved independently of their owners, stretching unnaturally under flickering lights, and the sense of being watched pressed down on every step in a narrow courtyard. A figure lingered beneath a broken street lamp, The edges of a hood shielded any identifying features, but movement betrayed purpose. A small piece of paper was folded and tucked into a crack in the wall, almost invisible except to the most observant. Fingers reached out cautiously, brushing against it, pulling it free. The paper held nothing but symbols, cryptic lines that seemed meaningless at first glance, yet carried a weight that was felt in the bones rather than read with the eyes. Somewhere across the city, another figure paused, sensing the invisible connection forming. Actions were being set into motion without a word, without a sound, as though the city itself were guiding them toward an inevitable confrontation. High above, on the edge of a rooftop, the wind rattled metal railings and tugged at the fabric of a coat. The figure there didn't flinch, didn't move except to scan the streets below. Tiny details mattered. A door left ajar, a shadow that lingered too long, a reflection in a puddle that wasn't where it should have been. Each observation was a piece of the puzzle, a thread leading toward something bigger, something unavoidable. The city whispered to those who knew how to listen, delivering warnings in the smallest, most subtle ways. A fluttering curtain, a faint echo, a distant shout all carried meaning, and only those who were attuned could read it. The air itself seemed to hum with anticipation, carrying secrets from one end of the city to the other, threading unseen connections between lives that would collide before the night ended, inside an abandoned building. The smell of damp would mix with something sharper, smoke or oil. It was impossible to tell. Objects were scattered across the floor, overturned chairs, broken glass, tapers soaked from rain leaking through a cracked roof. Shadows filled the corners, stretching and retreating as if alive, hiding motions that might be too dangerous to see. A hand reached out, brushing against a stack of envelopes tied with string. Each contained a secret, a memory, a warning, but none of them bore names, only symbols, codes, and signs that hinted at what was to come. Somewhere deeper, footsteps echoed, soft and deliberate, each one a choice. Whoever was moving in these spaces understood that mistakes were not an option. One wrong step and the delicate balance of secrets would shatter. Outside, the city responded to the tension. Rain fell harder, hitting metal and pavement in rhythmic bursts that matched the unspoken heartbeat of the night. Cars slowed as if sensing something ahead, lights reflecting off slick streets like fractured mirrors, revealing fleeting glimpses of figures that vanished as quickly as they appeared. The wind carried whispers, not of words, but of intention, a silent message that traveled through the alleys, across rooftops, and into the spaces where no one dared to tread. A faint glint of metal caught the light, a shadow moved where none should have been, and the sense of inevitability grew. Every corner held a story, every shadow a warning, and every sound a secret being passed along. The night itself seemed to fold in on itself, compressing time and space until everything was on the edge of revealing its truth. By the time the storm reached its peak, the city was almost unrecognizable. Neon lights flickered erratically, puddles shimmered with unnatural reflections, and the wind carried voices that didn't belong to anyone standing there. The figures that had moved unseen for hours were now closer, converging toward an unseen center, driven by the same silent force. Every motion, every glance, every careful step was leading toward a moment that would change everything. The darkness wasn't just around them, it was inside them, shaping their choices, whispering possibilities that felt both irresistible and terrifying. And in that charged silence, the city waited with bated breath, knowing that by dawn, the secrets it had held for so long would no longer belong to the shadows, they would belong to whoever dared to uncover them. The night had thickened into a living thing, wrapping the city in tension so dense it seemed almost tangible. The rain had slowed to a persistent drizzle, leaving streets slick and shining, reflecting fractured neon in patterns that made the familiar streets feel unfamiliar. Every shadow now seemed to move with intent, stretching and twisting in the corners of vision. And the faintest sound, the creak of a gate, a distant footstep, felt amplified. Significant, a warning that someone, somewhere, was watching. Time itself seemed to bend. Moments dragged with suspense yet vanished before they could be fully processed, leaving only a feeling that something monumental was about to happen. In a narrow passage, a figure crouched beneath the weak glow of a flickering street lamp, hands steady but eyes sharp. Every small motion mattered. A dropped glove, a shuttered window, a loose brick that could hide a message or a weapon. Across the street, another presence mirrored these careful movements, unseen but deliberate, tracking, calculating, waiting for the perfect moment to act. There was no chaos here, only the taut tension of coiled intent, the silent orchestration of events that had been set in motion long before this night. Each step, each glance, each breath taken in the dark was a signal. An invisible thread linking lives across the city, converging toward something unavoidable but above the streets. Rooftops glistened with wet tiles and metal railings. Figures moved with predatory grace, shadows slipping silently from ledge to ledge. The wind carried their presence, lifting the edges of coats and scarves just enough to hint at movement without revealing identity. From this height, the city looked like a chessboard. Intersections became strategic points, alleys transformed into traps, and every light flicker was a cue. The night itself seemed to bend around them, shaping and guiding every motion, every decision. A single misstep, one miscalculation, could ignite a chain of events that would ripple through the entire city, exposing truths no one was ready to face. Inside an old building that had been abandoned for years, tension simmered like static in the air. This hung thick, disturbed only by the soft echo of footsteps moving over cracked tiles. Doors groaned under careful pressure, and a faint metallic scent hinted at hidden objects, at weapons, or messages that could change everything. Shadows pooled in the corners, stretching unnaturally, almost alive, as if the walls themselves were listening. A hand reached out to touch a symbol etched into the wall, fingers tracing the grooves with a mixture of curiosity and fear. Each detail held meaning, an overlooked piece of a puzzle, a silent warning, a promise of revelation. Somewhere deeper, faint whispers moved through the corridors, unintelligible but urgent, guiding those brave enough to listen toward the center of what was about to unfold. The city responded to the tension in small, almost imperceptible ways. Streetlights flickered, puddles shimmered with unnatural reflections, and distant sirens cut across the night like warning signals. A car rolled slowly through the streets, headlights cutting across dark corners, illuminating brief flashes of movement that vanished before comprehension. Somewhere a window cracked open with a sudden pop, a curtain twitched, a shadow shifted, and the city seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. The threads of countless hidden stories were tightening, pulling toward an unseen center where all secrets, betrayals, and intentions would collide. The energy was almost physical, pressing on every surface, entering every crack, every doorway, every alleyway. And then, as the tension reached its peak, the city seemed to pulse once, a silent exhale that carried the weight of all the stories it had held. Shadows converged, movements aligned, and the sense of inevitability became undeniable. The night had been waiting, the darkness had been patient, and now everything was poised on the edge of revelation. Faces hidden, identities masked, intentions secret. The moment was close, the unseen forces ready to collide. And in that charged, silent instant, the city seemed to whisper one final truth. The beauty in the dark is not always what it seems, and the secrets long buried are about to step into the light.